Over the last 2 years, Animex has been working in collaboration with the People's Trust for Endangered Species to review and assess the level of success of the historic design and use of wildlife bridges in the provision of habitat connectivity for arboreal species in construction projects. An apparent lack of scientific research into the design of these structures, together with a lack of post-installation monitoring, has resulted in a lack of confidence and understanding of their level of success. A trial was undertaken in Japan which highlighted the success of a specific design of Arboreal wildlife bridge in connecting two areas of woodland dissected by a road. Animex and PTES installed an adapted design of this structure in the UK and have undertaken a dedicated monitoring programme to determine its suitability in connecting two areas of fragmented habitat for the Arboreal Hazel dormouse. In this presentation, we will investigate the design and installation of a number of historic Arboreal wildlife bridges in the UK, discussing the pros and cons of each. We'll then discuss the Animex PTES study, and finally investigate the potential use of this design in promoting arboreal habitat connectivity in the future. The Hazel dormouse is a small nocturnal rodent native to the UK. It's largely arboreal, utilising aerial pathways in the tree and scrub canopies to move around its home range. They are reluctant, although not fully adverse, to cross habitat gaps at ground level. The Hazel dormouse is a sequential specialist feeder and relies on access to a range of plant species within their home range to provide food throughout the active season, which spans approximately May to November. Dormice have a small home range. For the adult male, this is approximately 1.9 acres, and live in low densities, typically approximately 2.4 adults per hectare in optimal habitat. Hazel dormice in the UK typically inhabit broadleaf woodland with a vigorous, dense understory, interconnected dense scrub and connected dense hedgerows. Roadside habitat is particularly important to dormice due to its density, connectivity and species diversity. The Hazel dormouse has experienced a marked population decline in the UK. The Hazel dormouse, its breeding sites and resting places are now legally protected by UK and European legislation. The species is required to be a material consideration in the planning process, as is promoting habitat connectivity as a whole. It's considered that the population decline can be attributed to a combination of habitat fragmentation, loss and isolation. For example, changes in woodland management resulting in a more sparse and less botanically diverse understory, and agricultural intensification which has led to the removal of hedgerows. In particular, due to the arboreal nature of the Hazel dormouse and its preference against crossing habitat gaps at ground level, railway and highway construction has led to large-scale habitat fragmentation in the UK, particularly wider roadways where tree canopies cannot meet above. Highways reduce the movement of individuals, reducing population strength through metapopulation establishment and gene transfer, as well as reducing accessibility to a range of habitats to provide food throughout the active months. Further, where dormice do cross highways at ground level, they become more open to predation as they've left the cover of vegetation, as well as the risk of collision with traffic. One further obstacle posed by an increasing number of larger highways in the UK is the installation of solid concrete safety barriers in central reservations, which pose a total block to wildlife passage. A number of wildlife bridges have been installed in the UK in an attempt to reduce arboreal habitat fragmentation, in particular associated with roadway construction. Due to their legal protection and the requirement to be a material consideration in the planning process, these structures have been predominantly aimed at use by the Hazel dormouse. A number of issues exist with these past structures, and many have received bad press, which can negatively impact upon conservation efforts. Aside from individual design issues with some of these structures, a number of broad issues are associated with historic arboreal wildlife bridges. For example, a lack of science-led design, a hope for the best attitude associated with lack of post-installation monitoring, substantial cost, longevity, and a lack of consideration of the specific location of bridges on a landscape scale. These issues prompt the need for evidence-based, affordable and reliable alternatives to prevent habitat fragmentation in human-influenced fragmentation situations. Green bridges, or land bridges, provide habitat connectivity for a range of species. Britain's first land bridge was constructed in 2006 over a major highway in Kent. This bridge has been planted up with vegetation, and dormice have been proven to use the structure. They've even been found breeding on the bridge itself. This, however, remains the only functional land bridge in the UK, presumably in part due to cost. Although undoubtedly ecologically viable in promoting habitat connectivity, green bridges carry with them a substantial cost, both in their design and installation and in ongoing management and maintenance. Therefore, although potentially viable in large-scale highway situations, they're often not viable in a range of smaller projects. In addition, and particularly when considering species such as the Hazel dormouse with limited home ranges, in combination with the cost of installing green bridges, it's unlikely that more than one such structure would be installed per highways project, therefore providing only limited habitat connectivity as the bridge would not be accessible to individuals located at other points along the highway route. One example of an arboreal pathway design, which had historically been recommended by the UK's Highways Agency, comprises ropes or wires suspended between two tall poles situated in adjacent woodland habitat either side of a roadway. The idea was that these structures mimic branches and therefore would encourage dormice to cross the gap via the rope. Although this design has been used as a habitat connector on a number of historic projects, and such a structure has been shown to allow safe passage of red squirrel and various primates outside of the UK, there has as yet been no definitive proof that a hazel dormouse has used such a structure to cross even a small habitat gap. It's likely that such a structure would be unattractive to a dormouse due to the real risk of predation due to lack of cover, and thereby poses the same issue faced by dormice crossing a gap at ground level. A range of designs of dormouse bridges have been installed in the UK in the past. These largely involve wire mesh tubes supported by a cable spanning a habitat gap. The wire mesh structure is based in part upon a study where dormice were proven to travel through a wire mesh tube approximately 50 metres long between 2 points. That said, these dormice were captive bred and were entrapped at either end in cages, and therefore this study should not be depended upon entirely when considering wild dormice in wild situations. A further potential issue with a wire mesh tube structure is that such a design provides two very small access points for dormice, thereby reducing the chances of wild dormice actually finding the entrance and subsequently using the bridge. Further, no ongoing and meaningful post-installation monitoring appears to have been undertaken in any such example, and therefore it is unclear whether they have been successful. In addition, a number of such designs have been installed without consideration for the surrounding landscape, and therefore in inappropriate locations, further reducing their chances of success. 3 mesh tube structures were installed in Wales over a main roadway which was to dissect dormouse habitat. The project received a large volume of negative press due to high costs, reportedly a total of approximately $250,000. The design of these bridges was also questionable. A number of mesh tubes were installed with breaks at each end, which resulted in a number of gaps which dormice would have to cross. Recent research has shown that dormice struggle to cross habitat gaps in excess of 15 centimetres, as shown by the following video. A number of arboreal species are also present in Japan, including the Japanese dormouse. Dr. Shisaku Minato of the Japanese Dormouse Museum has been leading an active program in Japan to design an effective arboreal wildlife bridge to cross habitat gaps over highways. The first design comprised an adapted steel gantry of approximately 50 metres in length and 9 metres in height over a roadway, which was found to be used by at least 4 species of wildlife, with active Japanese dormouse and Japanese woodmouse nests on the bridge itself. The downside of this structure was the cost, in excess of $260,000 due to its size. This led to the development of a smaller design, a pathway suspended on a cable over a roadway, with a roof for environmental and predator protection, suspended rope and mesh floor for running along, and periodic shelters for predator protection. The specific design also prevents the build-up of snow and icicles, protecting traffic beneath. Such a design cost in the region of $26,000. CCTV monitoring of one such bridge illustrated its use by a range of arboreal and part arboreal mammals more than 800 times in 3 months, even though the road across which it spanned was only 10 metres wide and not heavily used by traffic. This suggests a preference for arboreal crossings over ground level crossing, even when the former was easily possible. Animals were actually found to travel out of their way to use this bridge. This design won awards from both the Japanese government and the construction industry. Following the proven success of the Japanese study, Animex and the People's Trust for Endangered Species came together to trial a similar structure in the UK to determine and monitor its effectiveness in connecting 2 areas of habitat known to be occupied by the Hazel dormouse. The aims of the study were to determine whether dormice would use the specific design of wildlife bridge, and to determine whether the dormice showed a preference between crossing the habitat gap at ground level or on the wildlife bridge. A bridge was constructed broadly following the design of the Japanese Arboreal wildlife bridge. This was suspended on a cable between mature trees, spanning a habitat gap of approximately 30 metres between woodland over a railway line. This width approximately equals that of a standard dual carriageway in the UK. Exclusion fencing was installed at ground level along both sides of the railway, spanning a total length of 200 metres each side. This is reflective of the likely dormouse home ranges. All other arboreal connectivity across the railway line within this area was severed. Small gaps were installed at regular intervals through the ground-based exclusion fencing. Motion-activated infrared cameras were then installed at each gap in the exclusion fencing to pick up any dormice crossing at ground level. 8 cameras were also installed on the bridge itself. The trial was installed in the autumn of 2015, and footage was collected from the cameras for the full dormouse active season of 2016, which spanned May to November. During the 2015 test, dormice were actually picked up on the bridge within 9 hours of its installation. During the 2016 monitoring season, single dormice were recorded on 3 occasions passing by the fence at ground level. These were recorded over 2 consecutive days by cameras only a few metres apart from each other, and within a couple of hours of each other. This was all on the same side of the railway, suggesting individuals did not cross the habitat gap at ground level, and that the videos likely showed only one individual dormouse. A total of 31 dormouse events were recorded using the bridge spanning the habitat gap, demonstrating a clear preference for arboreal dispersal routes. In addition, 94 events of red squirrel were also recorded on the bridge, as opposed to only 44 on the ground. Due to the success of the trial and the ongoing need for an effective solution for arboreal habitat fragmentation for such an iconic species in the UK, the Animex and People's Trust trial has attracted a lot of positive interest both from conservationists and within the press. The Japanese and Animex PTES trials provided clear evidence of the suitability of the specific arboreal wildlife bridge design in facilitating arboreal habitat connectivity by a range of species. We've since been working with engineers and highways authorities in the UK to provide a durable, cost-effective and compliant product that can be installed on a range of infrastructure projects. As few adaptations as possible have been made to the design of the bridge to ensure its continued suitability for use by arboreal species. To increase longevity and to achieve compliance with highways protocol, the bridge has been updated into a fixed structure rather than one suspended on a cable. This can then be installed on concrete plinths at either side of a habitat gap. Alternatively, this structure can also be retrospectively fitted onto existing bridges over highways or railways or within larger underpasses. The structure of the bridge extends at an angle into vegetation at either end, with its open structure providing maximum entry points, increasing opportunities for use by arboreal species. The structure is modular, allowing for it to be bespoke and adaptable to each situation. The bridge structure also comes with a lifetime guarantee, requiring very little ongoing maintenance, further reducing project costs. The bridge is extremely cost-effective and provides a cheaper and proven alternative to more costly and potentially ineffective alternatives for arboreal species. The location of the installation of this bridge should be carefully considered to provide maximum opportunities for arboreal species, for example, at a population hotspot and within well-connected habitat. A programme of habitat strengthening suitable to the species of use would likely complement the installation of the bridge, and therefore its installation should be part of a wider landscape strategy to ensure its success. A period of post-installation monitoring of all bridges would also be necessary to inform any necessary adaptations to associated habitat management regimes. The use of the bridge could work in conjunction with green bridges. It could provide increased opportunities for arboreal wildlife to cross a major road at more points without significantly increasing the cost of the project. This is particularly good when considering species such as the Hazel dormouse with a small home range. The successful Japanese and UK trials have led to the evolution of a design of arboreal wildlife bridge which, if suitably installed within a landscape scale scheme, provides effective ongoing habitat connectivity solutions for a range of arboreal species where habitat fragmentation would have previously prevented dispersal. This allows infrastructure projects around the globe to comply with both planning policy and wildlife legislation, whilst positively benefiting the continued conservation status of the species in the wider environment. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. We hope you found it useful and informative. If you have any questions or think that a wildlife bridge could be suitable for your project, please do not hesitate to get in contact with us and we will be happy to help.